then it doesn't matter how advanced you get. It doesn't matter, if you're an ET from the 1200th dimension, and you can move objects with your mind, and you can be in 1,000 places at once, and you can know yourself fully, and da-da-da. The essence, if there's only one essence, if there's only one substance, one infinite eternal substance, then somehow that individual experience or expression must still be made of that. There's many expressions of wood, but every table is made of wood. Well, that's not true, but you get the point. There's many different waves, large waves, small waves, ripples, there's bubbles in the ocean, but it's all made of absolute knowledge. It's all made of water. I'm a believer and experiencer, direct perceiver of this unity, this oneness, the fact that the essence of all experiences is of the same nature. It's of the same essence. Where delusion comes in, or ignorance, and therefore also suffering and dissatisfaction, or whatever the opposite, or the obscuration, if that's a word, of happiness. Is that a word? Is that a word? Obscuration?
It is now.
It is now. Cool. So the eclipsing of happiness, or self-knowledge, if happiness happens to be self-knowledge, which in my experience, the greater my self-knowledge, the greater my happiness. Or my perception of happiness, you could say. Maybe happiness is actually the nature of reality. And the degree to which we're able to perceive that nature is the degree to which we perceive our innate happiness. Maybe it's not a thing that we accomplish or acquire. Maybe it's a matter of transparency more than anything else. Because if we are of that same nature, then all there is degrees of distortion, how much this self-knowledge is eclipsed. And so purification would be the antidote. The purification of the filters, the purification of perception, the purification of intention, the purification of assumptions, the purification of direct perception will lead to a transparent filter, aka an individual mind or being. And if that filter, aka the individual sense of me, is purified, is emptied out, this is where emptiness comes in as a helpful tool, then the more transparent this wave of the ocean is to the fact that it is water, and the less it is assuming that it is a wave of this size and this shape and this dimension and this movement and this speed and so forth, and this memory and this past. One of the biggest eclipsers, is that a word? of this innate intrinsic happiness, which is again simply the recognition, the direct perception of an expression of life, of the life itself that enables that expression. So it's the expression of life, recognizing life itself, recognizing its indivisible substratum, its true nature, beyond the concepts of this or that, beyond any constructs, beyond any assumptions. Now, one of the greatest eclipsers is the sense perceptions. They pull, in a sense, a veil over the eyes of the mind, because we're always gauging ourselves by what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're hearing, and so forth. And we don't realize until we start to really investigate it, but even then it keeps surprising us, the degree to which sense perceptions condition our assumption of self and our assumption of limitation. Because one of the eclipsers is to believe that we're limited, to believe things that are not true, to believe that I'm this, that I'm that I'm such and so, and I need to work on this and that particular thing. If not, then da-da-da. Or I need to acquire this, or all these trivialities, if you will, or these surface ripples that are so heavily identified with by life in the form of that individuated expression, that individuated ability to have autonomous intelligence, which doesn't mean separation. Just because you have autonomous intelligence and I have an autonomous intelligence, it is an assumption to therefore say you and I are not one. In infinite unity, everything is possible. Any expression can exist and will exist and does exist. And the journey is experienced by that aspect of life, but it is an aspect of an indivisible whole, an indivisible unity, an indivisible source that is ever radiating, ever the same throughout all expressions, throughout all life forms, regardless of its state of evolution, whether it's the rockness, whether it's a more evolved rock that stands on its own in the middle of nowhere, that has more of an identity, whether it is basic plant life, mineral life, and so forth, where movement begins, where growth begins, where the desire, the instinctual desire for self-knowledge in the form of movement, of spatial recognition, space-time experience starts to dawn, or whether it is in the animal, which is already becoming more autonomous, more able to be aware of itself as an autonomous expression of life, or whether it's in a human being, or whether it's in whatever is next. The essence is never changed. The form, the expression, the autonomous nature of that form to be able to know itself has changed. But the essence has been the same, and it's the same throughout. So actually, separation is the assumption. From this vantage point, unity is not an assumption. God is not an assumption. Eternal, infinite, all-encompassing life is not an assumption. Limitation, separation, real individuality, solid individuality, all these things are assumptions from this vantage point of the direct perception of the nature, the spontaneous, ever-present nature of appearances or experiences or phenomena or consciousness. So, since everything is that, it can be a little bit of a stalemate. So then therefore what? Like everything is source, everything is the one, everything is the one eternal being. That typically doesn't satisfy, at least not if that stays conceptual, because that's just another framework posed by a mental construct that is an expression of the indivisible unity, which is life itself. And now it's putting forth, as part of its ability to evolve and to think for itself, an image of the one indivisible self, which is, you could say, a marker, a pointer on its way back to source. But as long as it doesn't satisfy, and by satisfy I mean deeply satisfy, deeply fulfill, deeply evoke a sense of wholeness, of oneness, of completion, of perfection, then it is a construct that mimics. It's a painting of the Grand Canyon. It's not the Grand Canyon. No. It's a painting of a nice lasagna when you're hungry instead of an actual lasagna. So we can have pictures of God, and we all do, and all the religions do, and so forth, but it's different than opening the door of self, the back door, I should say, perhaps, although it doesn't really matter where you imagine it to be, but it's kind of like a back door, because our experience of the front of us, what's in front of us, is always sense perceptions and thoughts and emotions and disturbances and individually described or describable phenomena. These phenomena appear. They are known. No phenomena has ever been known without being known. It's a pretty indisputable fact, I would say. No phenomena has ever been known without being known. So, if we wish to minimize, in the quest for more sort of absolute self-knowledge or absolute self-awareness, if we wish to minimize our assumptions, we have to, first of all, look at our direct experience and consider what it is made of. Because what is phenomena except for experience? I could also say there's never been a phenomena, at least that we know of, apart from experience. What we call things are only known as experience. There is no other avenue for us, right? So we gotta use the means that we have, that we can rely on, that is our direct experience, that we can testify, so to speak. And all we can really say, if we investigate purely enough, in a sense quietly enough, or directly enough, or pristinely enough, is that I have never known a thing other than experience. So I might call this table a thing. I might call my body a thing. I might call the world a thing. But I only know it. All I've ever met or encountered is an experience. And if you spend some deliberate time, maybe not now, but to try to dispute this, you will gain conviction naturally, spontaneously, and profoundly in this truth. And that alone can cut through a lot of assumptions and a lot of delusions and a lot of dissatisfaction that seemingly disconnects you from your recognition of the essential, intrinsic, spontaneous, ever-present nature of primordial wakefulness or original purity or the emptiness of things. Now, this doesn't sound very appealing typically to a mind that has become reliant for its sense of self, for its identity, upon sense perceptions with the assumption, which is what we typically do. We have sense perceptions with the assumption. This is why we can counter it. This is why we can work to release ourselves from that. We have sense perceptions with the assumption attributed to it, unconsciously, automatically, all the time, that it is a real thing, that exists apart from perception, consciousness, experience. But we've never ever, if we stop to pause to think, reason with true logic, with direct observation, combined with intuitive logic, we would have to conclude that none of our experiences ever has escaped them being experiences. Like, we don't know anything but experience. So we gotta work with what we have, what is actually the case. And there's so many assumptions about what's real and what's da-da-da.